Good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for July the 16th. Today, our reading consists of 1 Samuel chapter 2, which contains in the first section of this text Hannah's prayer, Hannah's wonderful, beautiful, faith-filled prayer. And then we transition to verse number 14, where we start reading about the scoundrels that are Eli's sons. Not good guys whatsoever. We're going to talk about that. We're going to contrast the faith of Hannah with the unfortunate faithlessness of these Levites. Let's get the text up on the screen and get to reading today here within 1 Samuel chapter 2. 1 Samuel chapter 2. Just a quick recap. We saw in chapter 1, Hannah was introduced as a barren woman who expressed great faith before Yahweh in the fact that she poured her heart out to Yahweh, asking for a son, not a son that even she would be able to keep, but a son that she would then return back to him in priestly service. Again, faith, incredible faith, strong faith. Those words are just not strong enough to describe the type of faith that Hannah has here to pray to God that she would experience his blessings as blessing of a child, but then would turn around and bless God with this child in his service. So this is a prayer that she prays here in 1 Samuel chapter 2. Hannah prayed, "My heart rejoices in Yahweh. My horn is lifted up by Yahweh. My mouth boasts over my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is no one holy like Yahweh. There is no one besides you, and there is no rock like our God. Do not boast so proudly, or let arrogant words come out of your mouth. For Yahweh is a God of knowledge, and actions are weighed by him. The bows of the warriors are broken, but the feeble are clothed with strength. Those who are full hire themselves out for food, but those who are starving hunger no more. The woman who is childless gives birth to 7, but the woman with many sons pines away. Yahweh brings death and gives life. He sends some down to Sheol, and he raises others up. Yahweh brings poverty and gives wealth. He humbles and exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the trash heap. He seats them with noblemen and gives them a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are Yahweh's. He has set the world on them. He guards the steps of his faithful ones, but the wicked perish in darkness. For a person does not prevail by his own strength. Those who oppose Yahweh will be shattered. He will thunder in the heavens against them. Yahweh will judge the ends of the earth, and he will give power to his king. He will lift up the horn of his anointed. That's Hannah's prayer here in 1 Samuel chapter 2. Verse 11 says that her husband Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy Samuel served Yahweh in the presence of the priest Eli. Eli's sons were wicked men. They did not respect Yahweh or the priest's share of the sacrifices from the people. When anyone offered a sacrifice, the priest's servants would come with a 3-pronged meat fork while the meat was boiling and plunge it into the container, kettle, cauldron, or cooking pot. The priest would claim for himself whatever the meat fork brought up. This is the way they treated all the Israelites who came there to Shiloh. Even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the one who was sacrificing, "Give the priest some meat to roast, because he won't accept boiled meat from you, only raw." If that person said to him, "The fat must be burned first, then you can take whatever you want for yourself," the servant would reply, "No, I insist that you hand it over right now. If you don't, I'll take it by force." So the servant's sins were very severe in the presence of Yahweh because the men treated Yahweh's offering with contempt. Samuel served in Yahweh's presence. This mere boy was dressed in a linen ephod. Each year his mother would made him a little robe and took it to him when she went with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife. "May Yahweh give you children by this woman in place of the one she has given to Yahweh." Then they would go home. And Yahweh paid attention to Hannah's needs, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of Yahweh. Verse 22. Now Eli was very old. He heard about everything his sons were doing in all Israel and how they were sleeping with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He said to them, "Why are you doing these things? I have heard about your evil actions from all these people. No, my sons, the news I hear the Lord's people spreading, it's not good. If one person sins against another, God can intercede for him. But if a person sins against Yahweh, who can intercede for him?" But they would not listen to their father, since Yahweh intended to kill them. By contrast, the boy Samuel grew in stature and in favor with Yahweh and with people. A man of God came to Eli and said to him, "This is what Yahweh says. Didn't I reveal to your forefathers' family? Didn't I reveal myself to your forefathers' family when they were in Egypt and belonged to Pharaoh's palace? Out of all the tribes of Israel, I chose your house to be my priests, to offer sacrifices on my altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod in my presence. I also gave your forefathers' family all the Israelite food offerings. Why then do all of you despise my sacrifices and offerings that I require at the place of worship? You have honored your sons more than me by making yourselves fat with the best part of all the offerings of my people Israel. Therefore, this is the declaration of Yahweh, the God of Israel. I did say that your family and your forefathers' family would walk before me forever. But now, this is Yahweh's declaration, no longer. For those who honor me, I will honor. But those who despise me will be disgraced. Look, the days are coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your forefathers' family, so that none in your family will reach old age. You will see distress in the place of worship, in spite of all that is good in Israel, and no one in your family will ever reach old age. Any man from your family I do not cut off from my altar will bring grief and sadness to you. All your descendants will die violently. This will be the sign that will come to you concerning your sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Both of them will die on the same day. Then I will raise up a faithful priest for myself. He will do whatever is in my heart and mind. I will establish a lasting dynasty for him, and he will walk before my anointed one for all time. Anyone who is left in your family will come and bow down to him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread. He will say, "Please appoint me to some priestly office so I can have a piece of bread to eat." And that is 1 Samuel chapter 2. Now, for the next few days, I think we might have 1 or 2 days sprinkle in. We're going to be doing 2 chapters at a time because the texts are decently short and they really contain a pretty good way the stories in those 2 chapters. So we'll be doing that over the next few days. But for today here in 1 Samuel chapter 2, we're looking at this prayer, this song of Hannah. It says it's prayed, but sometimes, especially in the Psalter, you'd have a hard time figuring out what's a prayer and what's a song, because they could both be either prayed or set to music. So we have here in this a prayer of praise, which could also be described as a doxology, where it is a word of praise to Yahweh. And within this text, Hannah's just overjoyed for the blessings that she has received from Yahweh. I want to really contrast the faith of Hannah with the absolute lack of faith of Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas. So we think about Hannah here. Hannah here confesses faith in verse number 2. She even gives an admonition to those who don't have faith, like Eli's sons in verse number 3. And then she really focuses in on God's deliverance and the fact that often the way he delivers is through the power of reversal, meaning he takes the situation of someone and completely flips it on their head, on its head. And he also does that for the wicked, that those who might seem to be prospering, their lives get flipped over on their head as well, and they suffer for the evil that they've committed. From Hannah's perspective, she says, "Listen, I was ready to fall, but Yahweh gave me strength. I was barren, and he made me fruitful. I was poor, and he made me rich." But none of this is really surprising, because this is simply who Yahweh is. This is the way that he rules the world. He rules the world through the reversal of fortunes and situations of those who show faith to him. Really what we see here all the way through chapter 2 in verses 1 through 10, in thinking about this prayer, this song of Hannah, is this is grace. This is an absolutely wonderful look into the grace of God, that he cares for individuals. He cares for individuals. And what Hannah works on, especially towards the latter part of the text here, verses 9 and 10, she knows that if God cares for individuals like this, then he most certainly will care for all things like this and make all things right in the end. If Yahweh will vindicate me, the thought is, then he will certainly vindicate his people and even affirm his rule through his king. She mentions that at the end of verse number 10, that he will give power to his king. He will lift up the horn of his anointed. Let's not forget that kings were promised through Abraham in Genesis 17 and verse number 6. So this wonderful prayer of Hannah starts off this chapter, and we're thinking, okay, you know what? This is pretty cool. This is a definitely a big change from the book of the Judges. This is great improvement. We're seeing faith in Israel. Except we have to continue the chapter and looking in verse number 12, because we have to remember this is during the time of the Judges, about the same time period, maybe towards the latter end of it. We're thinking, man, we don't see very much faith in Israel during the time of the Judges. We're thinking maybe these people will be better, because we've seen that from Hannah. She's better. Maybe the rest of them are as well, except unfortunately they're not. Eli's sons were wicked men. That's the same word that Hannah uses to not describe herself in chapter 1 of verse 16. Don't think me as a wicked woman, because she certainly wasn't. But instead, Eli's own sons were wicked men, which is so interesting that he falsely accuses Hannah of wickedness, but then he's not even willing to see his own son overt wickedness. Their sins, very much so, they came back to them being proud and them being arrogant, thinking that they were more important than God, having contempt for his offerings. We know that the priest had a share in the sacrifices, the breast and the right leg from Leviticus chapter 7, that they were allowed to have that. But unfortunately, what we see is that they take more than that. They would send their servants to go to the sacrifice, whatever it's being boiled in, and instead of allowing it to be boiled, allowing the fat to be boiled off first, to be burnt off, because that belongs to Yahweh, because that's the best part, they would just go and take it while it's still basically raw and pull some out. They would not give Yahweh what belonged to his. And for that, Yahweh is going to come on them very, very severely. But as we work our way through the text, we're going to see just the contrast between Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and then this young boy, Samuel. He's a mere boy, just a boy. Going back to yesterday's read, later on in some of the intertestamental writings, I think the Maccabees, something like that, there's writings there of women weaning their children off by the time they're 3. So Samuel could have been taken to Shiloh very early on. We're talking 3-4 years old. So he's a mere boy, and yet he was dressed in a linen ephod, and his mother made a little robe and took it to him when she was with her husband to offer the animal sacrifices. She is just setting this boy up for great success. And Eli recognizes that and blesses Elkanah and Hannah for the good that they were doing with with Samuel. And you could see in verse 21, because of Hannah's faith, God ends up blessing her with even more children. At the end of verse number 28, we see that there's a contrast there. So what's on both ends? In verses 22 through 25, Eli rebukes, I think a soft rebuke, softly rebukes his sons. I don't know if he's more worried about the fact that they're disrespecting Yahweh or the fact that the people are aware of this. Really not sure which he is more upset by. And he could have done more. He just kind of tells them, you can't do this, but he could have removed them as priest. He very well could have done that. He was the boss priest. He was the one running the show. He could have removed them, but he didn't. He did not do that. And part of the interplay here behind the scenes is the fact that Yahweh was intending to kill them. And he's going to use this rebellion to teach a lesson and to show what happens whenever you hold his sacrifices with contempt. So contrasting that type of behavior, the fact that not only were they doing these things with the sacrifice, but they're also running around and sleeping with the women who worked at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So we have contempt for sacrifices and fornication. looking just like pagans, basically. We contrast that verse 26 with Samuel, who grew in stature and in favor with Yahweh and with people. I think the author really wants us to draw the contrast here to see the difference between Eli's sons and then Eli's protege. There's a big difference between these two, between the sons and the protege. And that's going to continue to make itself even more evident as we go throughout the text. Now, there is a man of God, probably a prophet of some sort, that comes to Eli and prophesies to him the perspective of God on the situation, and he speaks of grace. Verses 27 and 28 speak about God's grace toward Israel as a whole, and also towards the Levites, that God's saying, I gave you the opportunity to serve in this wonderful role. I graced you with the ability to serve as my servants before the people, to be the mediators between me and my people. But you despise my offerings. You have honored your sons more than me. And here's how you've done that: by making yourselves fat with the best part of all the offerings of my people. So not only had they been taking this, but it almost seems as if Eli himself had been benefiting from their contempt of Yahweh's sacrifices. They had rejected his grace. They had rejected the grace of God. And for that, they were going to be rejected. There would be a new line of priests that would arise from the Levites. And we'll see that later on in the story. But not only that, you will see distress in the place of worship. We're going to see that here pretty soon with the Philistines stealing the Ark of the Covenant. He's going to see violent deaths of family. There's going to be all sorts of trouble that comes whenever the ark is captured here in the next couple chapters. But here's the thing: God's grace abounds. Now, even though this group of priests have been horrible and have fallen short in every way, Yahweh is still going to raise up a faithful priest for himself, and he will do whatever Yahweh's heart and mind wills. He will establish a lasting dynasty will be established for him, and he will walk before my anointed one for all time. So again, this prophecy here, this futuristic prophecy, I think probably has a couple of different layers to it. Some for something soon that will happen, maybe a prophet and a king. Maybe the anointed one might be referring to a king here in the near future. But most certainly we look forward to Jesus, who is able to fulfill all of these roles of prophet, priest, and king, and do so perfectly before Yahweh. So here within this chapter, again, we see this complete contrast between individuals. We have this barren woman who God has blessed because of her faith, showing even greater faith. And then we have these men who are in a very prestigious position, these men who are in a very privileged position, absolutely neglecting it, showing contempt for their privileged position and disgracing Yahweh through their behavior in every way. And of course, you see the outcome whenever you are someone who has contempt for Yahweh, contempt for his name, contempt for his sacred space, contempt for his sacred sacrifices. You will be punished, as they will soon be. But if you're someone, even a barren woman who God has blessed with a child, and you continue to show faithfulness, that grace upon grace upon grace abounds, then you see a woman who goes from having no children to having 6 total. What a blessing that is. Friends, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what else what better evidence to give you for the reality of faith being the better way. Trust in Yahweh being the better way. Continued faithfulness in Yahweh being the better way, because too many people would ask something of Yahweh, he would bless them in that way, and then they would just forget about him. But not Hannah. No. Hannah continued in her faithfulness in response to the grace of God. And may we certainly learn that lesson to do the same. May our response to God's grace be greater faithfulness, greater commitment, greater trust, and greater loyalty. If you have any questions about this text here in 1 Samuel chapter 2, I invite you to please leave that in the comment section below. We'll be reading tomorrow, as I mentioned, from chapters 3 and 4 of 1 Samuel. Hope you will tune in for that as we see Samuel's call, a pretty funny little story here about the voice that Samuel hears and goes back and forth with Eli during the night. It's a pretty cute little story involving little Samuel. And then we're going to see some not so good stuff where the ark of where Yahweh's ark is captured by the Philistines, and just the trouble begins there within that text. So I hope you'll tune in for that. Really excited for today. It is the day we've been waiting for some time. Jim Jonas will be with us to begin presenting to us a series of lessons on building better relationships. I hope we'll be able to see everyone at 10 a.m. for his first lesson. And then again at 11, we'll have a potluck following our morning assemblies. And we'll get back together again this afternoon at 4 o'clock for another lesson. Then hope you can participate in everything we have going on today. If you missed something though, don't worry. I will have the lessons uploaded to our website, and they'll be on our YouTube channel and Facebook page, so you can check those out there as well. Again, thanks so much for tuning in today, everyone. Hope we all enjoy a wonderful, wonderful Sunday. May God bless you in all that you do, and hope you'll tune in again tomorrow as we continue reading here in 1 Samuel. Take care, and God bless.